In this next movie, we're going to be styling the footer area and all of the elements inside of it. Let's just go to our code view so we can take a look at that footer area. And you can see here it starts with an open and closing footer tag. Within each of those are section tags, and those section tags each have a class of foot box. And there are 3 of them. One of them has a form inside of it, and one of them has the contact information for Facebook, Twitter, Google, etc. So these are the elements we're going to be addressing. If I return to my design view and we go to the CSS styles, you can see that footer is already here, just set to clear both, and the foot boxes are here as well with padding on the top of 20. Not really much of anything else happening in this particular moment. So we're going to come in and we're going to make a couple of changes. You might be asking, well, how come these things are set up specifically to be 3 columns? Well, if you remember, they are sections, and the section up at the top here has already been set to float left and have 320 for the width. So that's why we don't need to address anything else. But we're going to go to the footer and we're going to edit the footer. Now the first thing I want to do is to just give it a background color. And I'm going to browse for that same BG tiling graphic we've been using. So I'll open that. If you apply that, you can see what's happening. Now I've also taken the time to put a little bit of extra margin at the bottom of the article. So that's why there's some space here. If you don't have some space as I do, all you got to do is go back to your landing and place a little extra margin on the bottom of that particular article. So here we are now, and as you can see, I may want to work with rounded corners on this footer as well. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to come into the Add Properties where I'll add a border radius. And we've done this enough that you might remember we should copy this, Command-C, Control-C. I'll put in 10 pixels here. But then we're going to add the property -moz Control V to paste that. 10 pixels as well. And we're going to do the same thing -WebKit. Control V, Command V on a Mac. 10 pixels as well. So now we have nice rounded edges. Now you can see that there's no space at the bottom. You might like that, but if you want to have a little extra space on that, just go back to your footer and we can edit the rule, which will allow us to perhaps put maybe some margin on the bottom. 20 pixels. Let's see what happens there. Now if we look at it, we should see everything looking the way we want it to. So we've got the information in place that we're going to need. The only other thing that I want to be doing is addressing the individual elements within here. So I'm going to select this little bit of text here. You'll notice it's a H3. And this H3 tag we are going to style. So I'm going to ask you to come in here. The foot boxes themselves should be fine the way they are right now. If you want to add a little extra padding on the top, certainly feel free to do so. However, I'm going to be addressing compound based on my selection, less specific, and it's going to be footer, footbox, H3s. So these H3s, I think I'll start by giving it Bebas Neue, and if you apply that, you can sort of see what that looks like. Maybe the font size will be 2 point, let's try 7. And that's fairly large. Now if you find that's too big, you can make some changes and move it around. Now I'm going to do something a little bit different than we did up at the top. I'm going to go to the background image, and in the background image I'm going to browse, and as you can see here I have the BG Trans. Well, actually it's the Logo Trans was the big one, and Logo Trans Small only has the icon. I think that's the one I want to be using here. So I'll click OK. If we were to apply that, we would see it be repeating, which I don't necessarily want. So I'm going to come in here and say no repeat. I also want to make sure that this particular element is going to be as large as this box happens to be. So the picture that I have here happens to have a height of 78. So I'm going to go to the box. I just want to make sure that the height value is there, and that will accommodate seeing all of the shadow area that we have here. That looks good, but we're also going to need to push aside my text. So I think while we're here in the box area, I'm going to go to the padding, and we can address a little bit of padding here as well. Let's try from the left. If I were to just say 80 pixels, might have to play around with this. Maybe 90 pixels would be more appealing. There you go. And I think that looks pretty good and pretty much exactly what we want to be seeing. So I'll leave that as is. Now there's a couple of other things that we should be addressing here. First of all, if we look at any and all generic footbox paragraphs, I think I'll come in here, select this one, and I probably just want that to be a little bit smaller than it actually is. So I'll say less specific, footer footbox P, and in here I'm just going to give it a font size of perhaps 0.9 em. Apply that, and that should take care of the elements there. Then I'm going to select the other element here, and this is an H4, and those H's are going to also be styled a certain way. So I'm going to come in and give it a new CSS rule, compound based on my selection, less specific. It's the H4s I'm targeting. Now these H4s, we can do a number of things. We can decide whether or not we want it in Bebas, but I think I'll just go with the Arial font that I've been using up to this point. I'll give it a font size of something like let's try 1.4 ems. See what that looks like. Once you apply it, it's a little too big for this area that I have defined here, so I think I'll take that down to maybe 1.2. That fits nicely into the area that I have right up here. So that's looking good. However, I may want to push it down a little bit more and make it look a little bit different from the one that we actually have right now. So perhaps I can go to where we have our box area, and maybe I'll just add a little bit of padding at the top. What if we were to say 20 pixels extra? You'll notice that those elements, both of which are H4s, are now pushed down. So it looks okay, but if I was going to do this, I'd probably push it down so that the baseline should hug together with this one here. So it's up to you to decide how much you want that to move. So if I do want it to move a little bit more, that might even be an extra 10. There you go. So you can put in a ruler in here just to make sure you're on the right path. I think I'm a little bit too big. Maybe 28 should be more sufficient, and that should work out quite nicely. Other than that, I'm going to click OK at the moment, and I'm leaving it black. It could be white if you want. It's completely up to you, but that's just something that you want to decide however you would like to do so. However, I am going to edit the rule, and I think one thing I will do is make it all uppercase. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, it looks good, but as you can see, when things become all uppercase, they become rather large. So perhaps, let's see if 1.1 works out. Not quite. So I think I'll keep it at 1.2, but maybe I'll just capitalize it. That looks good, and I think I'll leave it that way. Okay, last thing I want to be doing is targeting these span areas right here. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to say new CSS rule, compound based on my selection, less specific. Those particular spans are really only going to have the foundation icons, and I'm going to use the social icons. And aside from that, I want to make them just a little bit larger. So 1.4 ems should suffice. Looking good. I'm pretty happy with the way everything seems to be worked out at this moment. I've got the links, and they're generic links, and I'm kind of happy with the way they look, so I don't really have a problem with those. And that's looking pretty good. Aside from that, you might want to add a little bit of padding or other elements in here, but I think I'm pretty happy with the way things are looking. So let's move on. In the next video, we're going to actually create the subpages that we're going to have linking to at the top of our file, and we'll get everything worked out quite nicely.